Hello, everybody. Welcome to Beyond Detection. We're going to be talking about building automated security workflows tied into early threat detection with AI gun detection. I'm Ara Bagdasarian, the co-founder of OmniAlert, and I'm joined by Eric Polovich, who knows more about this technology than anybody else does in the industry. He's been doing it for almost 2 decades, so it's great to be working with Eric here. But we're going to be talking about the core element of everything we do is about prevention, kind of looking at what we are, what we're doing, and how we can support you to keep your community's environment safe. Before we get started though, I want to make sure that everyone is aware there's a Q&A button in the middle of your screen down the bottom. If you have any questions for Eric or myself at any time during the program, just hit the Q&A button and we will address those questions as we get towards the end of the program. Eric's going to give you a nice overview, but just kind of give you an idea of what we're going to be touching upon today. Just kind of give you an idea about who OmniAlert is, talk about the modern security environment. So much has evolved over time. But OmniAlert, we started over 20 years ago with a simple mission to protect people. It's about preventing harm. When we first started, it was about mass notification, be able to communicate with people to keep them out of harm's way. But now we're evolving things and looking towards preventative measures using AI and computer vision to identify threats and then notify people, automate workflows, which include notifying law enforcement, notifying people of information, locking doors, other things that can make an impact when a threat is detected before something actually happens. That's what we're all about. Move on to the next slide, Eric. So I started mentioning a little bit about the current security environment. 20 years ago, it was a very a simple environment, if you will. But over time, as technology has evolved, you've got different types of systems that work independently, but really to capture the essence and value of those systems, they should work together. And so Eric's going to talk a little bit more about how technology has evolved and how they need to work together to keep people out of harm's way when a threat is detected. So Eric, I'll turn it over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ara. To just kind of set the stage for the conversation, the important thing to remember is, over the last decade, 2 decades, there's been a lot of investment into security technology. Most environments have cameras, access control, notification platforms, alarm systems of some sort. You might have a monitoring center, a mobile application, all sorts of specialty security tools. And the good news is all these technologies work. Information's everywhere. The real challenge is that coordination of all of this information is hard. These systems were often acquired at different times from different vendors to solve different problems. And each system generates really valuable information. They generate awareness. Today's organizations are generating a lot of information, more awareness than ever before. We have more security technology in place than we ever have. There's all of those disparate systems. But every one of those systems provides different information when an incident occurs. That information exists in different places. It's managed by different teams following different processes. So even when we create that valuable awareness, response doesn't necessarily follow the same way. The information exists, but it's fragmented across systems that weren't designed to work together. And that's where organizations lose a lot of valuable time. That's really the problem that we're talking about today, the challenge of what happens after a threat is detected in your environment. How do you transform a disconnected system into a coordinated response? And Ara's already thrown up that first poll question. When a security threat is identified, what's the real biggest challenge in your response process? So go ahead, take a second to answer that. And while those responses are coming in, Ara, you got anything to add on this?
No, I just want to reemphasize, the point that we strongly believe in, that technology are tools for humans to become exponentially more effective. It's a force multiplier for a human being. And so having these tools at your disposal are awesome, but they are more effective when they are integrated and can work together. So let's take a look here. Just give it another couple seconds. Okay, people are still responding here. Okay, okay, I think we're good. I'm gonna end it. All right, let's take a look at results here, Eric. Notifying the right people quickly was the top choice. Are you surprised at that?
Not at all. I would say that notification is probably the tip of everyone's mind, making sure the right people have the right information so that they can take the right action. I'm surprised that coordination isn't higher on this list because notification is definitely important, but having everybody acting together off that same set of information, I think is really the goal of notification. Verifying, also not surprised to see that popping up there as well. Making sure that we understand the threat is a big part of the process that we're going to talk today. What ultimately determines the outcome of what happens when we detect a threat is all of the moving pieces that happen afterwards. That's really what we're talking about today. The security industry, as I said to start off, we become really good at creating awareness. Cameras generate observations, monitoring centers generate alerts, panic buttons make events, gunshots, gun detection. They all generate notifications. It's not a lack of information. That's not the problem. The problem is that this awareness by itself doesn't lock a door. It doesn't notify staff. It doesn't dispatch responders. Every one of these technologies can tell us something's happening, but what may be even more important is what happens next. And that's where a lot of organizations are not focusing. We have the mechanisms to create this awareness, but in a lot of cases, we haven't bridged the gap between detection and response by connecting that detection event to people, to workflows, and to automated actions. Let's assume we've successfully detected a threat. Now what? There's a lot of moving parts to emergency response. Somebody needs to verify the event. We need to determine whether it's credible. We need to notify security, leadership, occupants. Doors might need to lock. Access control needs to change its state. Notifications need to be sent. First responders may need to be contacted. All of these different issues require attention. All of them take time. All of them have to happen while the situation is still unfolding. The reality is that an awareness event doesn't create a single task. It creates dozens of tasks. Some of them are sequential, some are simultaneous, all of them are time sensitive. So the question becomes, how do you coordinate all of that quickly enough to matter? Most detection methods create an alarm, whether it's access control, analytics, weapon detection, whether we're talking about a 911 call, it's all the same. We've created that awareness. We've created an event. It's really just another way of saying something important has happened that needs attention. We're really good at talking about the technologies that create an event. I talk about gun detection all the time. And the AI is where we tend to spend a lot of focus. The system that's generating the awareness, that's creating the event, seems to be the focus of a lot of these conversations. But we don't spend a lot of time talking about the operational workflow that follows it. The conversation needs to include that, how quickly, how consistently we can help an organization turn that awareness into coordinated action. Detection, regardless of where it comes from, is simply a trigger. It's the starting point of an end-to-end security workflow. So every security workflow begins with that first step. That's the trigger. It's something that indicates that an event is taking place, and it kicks the ball, so to speak, down the road. That information can come from any of these systems. Security officer observing a suspicious behavior, a panic button, an access control system, an audible gunshot. The important part is these are all simply sources of awareness. The process, the people, the technology, those are really just responding to the same question. Something's happening. Somebody should pay attention. Ara?
Yeah, Eric, it's important to emphasize that, part of the objective here, no matter what the situation is to identify a threat as early as possible. And so the idea that you are able to identify a threat using visual gun detection, in this case, obviously, if there's a human out there that sees a gun, they can certainly initiate a panic button or call 911. But having that ability to identify a threat early makes a significant impact on the remainder of the actual incidents. When you think about a layered approach, I know you're going to talk about that, but starting that layered approach out in the perimeter of a facility, whether it's a school or a retail or a hospital center, doesn't make a difference.
It's true. It's true. And I know we like to talk about firearm detection here at our OmniAlert, but I want to zoom out for a moment because we're not just talking about gun detection. This is a philosophy for responding to critical incidents. Every organization faces all sorts of different kinds of emergencies. It could be a visible firearm, a panic button activation, a suspicious person. The trigger changes depending on the situation. But if you think about what happens next, the operational workflow, the response is almost always the same. First, someone has to understand what's happening. Is this a real event? Is this a false alarm? What's the context that it takes place in? Then someone needs to make a decision. How serious is it? What response is appropriate? Then the right people need to be informed. Protective actions need to be initiated. Doors might need to lock. Notifications go out. Everyone involved, from on-site staff to first responders, needs to coordinate around the same accurate information. Whether you're responding to violence, a medical emergency, some other type of critical event, those operational steps don't really change. The initiating event changes. The response philosophy stays remarkably consistent. The same operational framework that I talk about week in and week out that makes Gun Detect effective also supports a much broader ecosystem of safety and security events. Different triggers, same operational philosophy. Throughout the rest of today's discussion, we're going to use a really simple framework. Every modern security workflow can be broken down into really three pieces. We detect something that requires attention, we verify what's happening and determine whether it requires action, and then ultimately we act. We coordinate people, we coordinate systems and responders to manage the incident. Whether the trigger's AI, a panic button, a human observer, or something else entirely, the workflow is fundamentally the same. All right, so you want to say something before I jump to the next slide?
Oh no, please proceed.
All righty. So we've really reached the second step of our proposed workflow here is verification. The more I work with security organizations, the more I think we've accidentally made verification an AI-specific term. But verification isn't just about AI. It's about operational judgment. Whether an event begins with a gun detection, with a panic button, with something else, every organization still performs verification. Someone reviews the available information, they determine what they're looking at, they decide ultimately whether the situation requires action. That's verification. If you've worked with AI analytics before, you've probably heard the term verification in that context. In our industry, it's almost become shorthand for human in the loop, but I'd argue that's only a part of the story. Ara?
Yeah, and what's important about this, Eric, is the relevance of context, and we see this all the time, especially in a school environment. You might have a theater club with a student that's using a prop gun. You don't want to lock down the school because of that. So having context from someone who is in that environment that understands that we have a track meet, and that's Coach Polovich that's walking out to the track. Do not lock the school down. So the human element is absolutely critical. And as you mentioned, all too often people have the misunderstanding that AI works in the background automatically and takes these actions. It's a tool for humans, for human to make that judgment call whether to take action or to dismiss the threat. It's an actual threat.
Absolutely. And in the AI industry, if we're not using AI to ultimately make a decision, then what's it doing for us? Well, it's acting as a force multiplier. We think about a modern security operation. There's 85 million surveillance cameras in the US. We have more cameras, more sensors, more information than ever before. We don't have 85 million people sitting in front of monitors watching them. Even in smaller environments, asking a security team to continuously watch hundreds or thousands of sensors just doesn't scale. AI changes the equation. It doesn't get tired. It doesn't get distracted. It can watch every camera simultaneously. It's able to find that needle in the haystack that we don't want to have our security teams doing on their own. We surface a handful of events that actually deserve attention, create the awareness systematically and efficiently. That changes the role of the human operator. We're not really asking someone to stare at a wall of monitors anymore, hoping they happen to be looking at the right camera at the right moment. AI extends their awareness across the entire environment, brings potentially important events directly to them in seconds. AI is making the human drastically more effective. It gives them speed, it gives them reach, it gives them something specific to evaluate. And that's where we come back to verification in this context. Once AI says you need to look at this, the next question isn't simply, is the AI right? It's what's really happening here. That's really the purpose of verification in our workflow. We turn information into understanding. Every event, as you said, Ara, doesn't require the same response. I don't care how good your AI is. It can't process content and intent as well as a human being can. A visible firearm carried by a police officer isn't treated the same way as someone entering a school with a rifle. A panic button might represent a medical emergency, or it might be an accidental activation. Access control alarm might just indicate maintenance rather than an attempted intrusion. Verification provides the context needed to make good operational decisions. It's understanding what's happening, how serious it is, and what should happen next. Those are operational decisions. They're not computer decisions. We detected the threat. We've confirmed that it's real. We understand what's going on. The next step is action. This is where organizations actually protect people. And protecting people requires coordination across security personnel, administrators, first responders, the technologies that support all of them. Once a detection has been verified, we need to immediately initiate the response plan. That could mean something simple like locking doors or activating alarms, could be initiating systems like notification platforms, making incidents in your VMS, or escalating out to first responders. It's a number of actions. We need them all to be initiated quickly. While the situation's ongoing, we need to know what needs to happen. Every organization already has a plan. Somewhere there's probably a binder, a checklist, or a standard operating procedure document that says, when this happens, do this. Sound the alarm. Mobilize the response team. The challenge is executing them quickly while the situation unfolds, while we're distracted, while we're emotional. We need to be able to execute consistently and quickly, because in an emergency, that speed matters. Ari, had something to add?
It does. Yeah, it does. Yeah. And I usually have my emergency operations plan on my desk as a prop because when this does come up, but that is so important, Eric. I mean, we all have an emergency operations plan for different types of scenarios. But what's critical is to take those passive plans that are in a binder on the shelf and making them actionable by actually building that into a workflow. So everything that you just mentioned, notify people in the building, lock the doors, notify first responders. Exactly. All of those things should go from your binder into your your platform, your emergency notification system platform, your OmniAlert platform. So when there is a threat detected, you can automate those workflows. And do those things that are in that static paper document on your shelf, actually making it actionable, which is a significant difference.
And you mentioned automation, automating workflows. That's really the key to this. I think about automation through a conversation that I had almost 20 years ago, back when I was working with the OmniAlert emergency notification customers. I walked into a security chief's office in Carolina, and he told me exactly what he wanted. This was an old school guy. He said, Eric, I want a big red button on my desk. When something goes down, I want to press that button and things start happening. Messages go out, systems react, people start moving. If you can do that, you have my business. I think about that conversation all the time because that's really the core idea behind automation. Those disparate actions aren't invented from whole cloth in the middle of an emergency. You've already decided that they should happen. That big binder you're talking about, it's not imaginary. I mean, I used to walk into security chief offices all the time. They had that big binder on the desk behind them or on the shelf at the other side of the room. We don't need to wait for someone to manually execute every step. We talked about making the decision during verification. The decision maker's already reviewed the actionable intelligence. He's determined whether the event requires action. We're not automating judgment. When the decision is made, automation executes. We don't have to tie all that process to a big red button. We can tie it to the workflow itself. The incident's detected, it's verified, the decision's made, and the predefined response starts automatically. That's how we gain speed. That's how we improve consistency. That's how we begin the most important minute, that first minute of a response earlier in the process. And that automated process doesn't happen in a vacuum. The systems that lock your doors, that send your messages, that sound your alarms, they're already there. Your security environment is already an ecosystem. The challenge is getting those systems to work together. Integration is what turns a collection of individual technologies into a coordinated response. It doesn't necessarily mean ripping and replacing. It means, in most cases, we've already got those connections. It means that we just need to find a way to have them react to each other. When this happens, do that. When a firearm's detected and verified, trigger the lockdown. When we get a panic button, send the message, create the alarm, notify so-and-so. The security industry has been integrating systems for years, longer than I've been around. It used to be with contact closures. Now it's, VMS platforms talking to access control, emergency notification, talking to your alarm panel. They already have APIs, they have webhooks, they have plugins, they have event engines designed to do exactly this. The key is to work with your vendors, work with your integrators, and ask a slightly different question. Not what does this product do, but what can this product trigger? What can trigger it? How do those system connections work?
Eric, I just want to, we had a number of people join in after we got started. I just want to remind
Sure.
folks to hit the Q&A button. If you have a question for Eric or myself, please hit the Q&A button. We'll answer those in a little bit. I just want to add one additional point on the whole integration side of things. I mean, you already have your physical security infrastructure. I mean, it would be horrible to have to rip things out every single time you want to add a new component. And the thing is, most companies, most vendors, most technologies will work together, but you just want to make sure of that before making any commitment to any specific technology. Because if you operate in silos, you're not going to be able to get the maximum benefit from the interoperability between the different systems.
Yeah, and it is all about that interoperability. 20 years ago, that security chief, he wanted a big red button. He wanted one action to start a chain reaction. We don't need the button anymore. Like I said, a verified event can be the trigger. Something happened, system, do your job. It's not about putting every security system on one screen. It isn't about replacing everything with one platform. It's about allowing systems to exchange enough information to start the next action. But I wouldn't say we're done yet. Simply raising the alarm, telling the systems to do their job isn't enough. Automation gets the response moving. Integration gets our systems working together. But ultimately, people still manage the incident. And this is where that collaboration step becomes critical to manage the incident to its conclusion. Notification and collaboration aren't the same thing. I can send thousands of people a message in seconds. We've been doing that for 20 years. But that doesn't mean that those people are coordinated. Coordination is giving the people managing the incident a common real-time picture of what's happening. Where was the incident detected? Has the situation moved? What actions already been taken? What information do we need to get the first responders involved? We've started our response at full speed. We hit the ground running. All of the different moving pieces have already been engaged. Alarms are sounding. Automation allows us to buy ourselves a little bit of time, a moment. You're not spending the first minute trying to figure out who needs to make a phone call or who was supposed to trigger the lockdown. Those actions are in motion. Now your team can immediately focus on managing the incident, a coordinated management. Share that real-time information. Your platforms should be able to do it for you. Update the situation as the conditions change. If you're making those decisions with the common operating picture, then you're able to coordinate that response all the way through to its resolution. That's the goal. It's a unified, orchestrated response. Detect, verify, act. Technology helps us identify the threat. Verification gives us an understanding and supports the decision to act. Automation and integration put the response plan into motion, and collaboration keeps everybody coordinated as the incident evolves. We want our information to move through the workflow quickly and intentionally. The technology works together. The people involved are informed quickly with the context necessary to make informed decisions. The plan's already defined. The pieces are set and ready. The response starts at full speed. That's what we mean when we say an orchestrated response. It's not just more technology, it's a better response. And that's the goal. It's, when we draw a line from one way to another on a slide like that, it looks really straightforward. Detect, verify, decide, act, collaborate. Somewhere in that process, there's usually points of friction. An alert sits somewhere waiting to be seen. Someone's waiting for a phone call. Those are the places where workflows tend to break down. It's not because the response plan is wrong, but because moving from one step to the next takes time. So let's pause here for a second. All right, you have another poll question that we can put up? There we go.
All right, let's take a look here. So you kind of talked about this, but let's see what folks think on this front.
Absolutely.
It's interesting as you're going through this, we talk about detection and using technologies to detect, but humans are very good at detecting things too, especially changes in behavior, behaviors of concern, to intervene before something bad happens. But when that fails, then you do utilize technology to be that threat detector. So.
Well, I would actually say that, humans are, well, I mean, they're an essential part of it, whether it's seeing something and saying something, or ultimately reacting to information that's forwarded to them. The difference is technology is just more efficient at being able to see something and say something over a wider area. And it is, repeatable. You can't count on everybody in your environment to say something the same way. You can't count on everybody in the environment to make the decision to say something. With the technology, you're setting it up purpose built. It is mission minded. It's going to do exactly what you set it to do every time.
Mm-hmm.
And the results that I see here aren't very surprising at all. Response varying by location or situation. Absolutely. We learned a long time ago, securing a college campus is different than a multinational corporation, different than a church, a house of worship, or even a convenience store. Security personnel manually coordinating the response. That's probably what I see in most situations. Something rises to light, we put it in the hands of people to act. There's not as much of an end-to-end, repeatable process there, because the thought is every incident is very different and needs special handling in kid gloves. When we take those incidents and we normalize them to a framework, though, especially a broad framework like detect, verify, act, it allows us to get some efficiency. That's one of the things that I like.
Eric, what's interesting on the human side of that manually processing reminds me of my father back in the 80s and early 90s when he was at Homeland Security, U.S. Customs at the U.S.-Canadian border at the Peace Bridge. When there was a bomb threat reported, he would have to manually at 3 a.m. pick up the phone, call U.S. Customs and the U.S. side, call the Canadian side, call the FBI, call the Buffalo Police Department, manually go through that whole, break out the phone tree when there's a bomb threat, and go through that process manually. Whereas utilizing the technology today to be able to automate that, okay, you get the one message out there and be able to communicate that simultaneously. Just another tool for human to utilize.
Yeah. Something that used to take us minutes or many minutes to do, we've boiled down to being able to do in 500 milliseconds. That's a big efficiency, benefit of efficiency. So just to kind of focus in on those where workflows break down. Delays really start occurring at the transitions between steps. A detection happens, but somebody has to find the information they need to understand it. They have to open another system. They have to find the right camera, pull up the video. The event's known, but the facts are still being assembled. Once we understand what's happening, we might need to find the person who can make the decision. Who has the authority to initiate a lockdown? Who makes the call to evacuate? We have to find them, explain the situation, wait for direction. The facts are known, but the action is waiting on a decision. Then that decision gets made. Somebody has to execute the plan, send the message, lock the doors, call security. We know exactly what we want to do, but the response still has to be initiated one step at a time. And lastly, everything's moving. The information might need to catch up. Security might know one thing. Leadership might know another. First responders might still be working from the initial report. As the incident changes, those updates still have to move across all of the different responding pieces. Find the information, find the decision maker, execute the plan, keep everyone aligned. Every one of those steps sounds perfectly reasonable, but every handoff introduces the opportunity for delay. In a critical incident, every handoff potentially costs time, and those delays can add up quickly. Time lost is time that you can't get back. And that's why through integration and automation, we reduce friction. The handoff from detection to verification is done programmatically and systematically so that, it's repeatable, it is standard, and it takes place quickly. Once we have a verified event that we can say the decision needs to be made through the power of integration and automation, we reduce that friction, reduce that time. We trigger those systems automatically in seconds rather than waiting for the human element to go and do another task. We've made the decision. We don't need to tell someone else to go trigger a system or flip a switch. The systems can do that for us. And the real benefit about that, why that matters, is because no single system owns the entire response. Your cameras, your VMS, your access control, each system has its own role. In most organizations, almost all organizations that I've dealt with, at least some of those systems come from different vendors. They were purchased at different times for different purposes. They might even be managed by different teams. That's the reality of a modern security environment. The big challenge is making all of those individual systems work together when something happens. Ara, we've got our last poll question that we can trigger at this point. And this is really all about confidence.
Okay, let's take a look here.
And I think confidence. Yep, go ahead.
But they can read that question. Go ahead, Eric. That's the important factor. The confidence, knowing what to do to respond with confidence is absolutely critical. And it's, you always have to plan for the worst, obviously.
And I would say that most of the concern, most of the lack of confidence here probably focuses on those friction points as well. I think that most people are pretty confident in their technology. The technology that I vetted, that I purchased, that I stressed over putting in, it better be good at doing its job, or else why do I have it? The people that I have making the decisions, I'm probably very confident in the fact that if armed with the right information, they can make that decision. The different technologies I've put in to respond, I'm probably pretty confident in those. But the information flowing from one piece to the next, to finally having that coordinated response, I would be willing to bet that that's where the lack of confidence lies.
Okay, look at that.
So what happens when those systems aren't designed to work across an ecosystem? That's the closed platform. The challenge with a closed platform isn't necessarily the technology's bad. In fact, the individual pieces probably work really well. The challenge is that over time, your workflow and your practices need to conform to the platform. It is a one-size-fits-all solution. Integrating means replacing systems that already work. Maybe you're limited to a particular set of devices or technologies, or maybe the next platform you need depends entirely on whether that vendor decides to build it. That becomes really important as your environment starts to change, because security environments do change. You replace a VMS, you add a new system to lock the doors, you add a location, you change who's working in your security booth. In a closed environment, changing one piece can mean reconsidering everything connected to it. And that's really a concern. Instead of the technology adapting to your response plan needs to start adapting to your technology. Ari, you got anything to add to that? I know that's a big talking point for you.
No, it is. You can't just overemphasize that having open systems is critical, because it all goes back to that. And Ted asked a question here: can we sum up your system as a traffic cop for integrating other systems? It kind of ties into this. I mean, certainly it's really an orchestration layer, if you will, to interface with other systems like your access control systems, your public address systems, if you're in a educational environment, your smart boards, summoning first responders, law enforcement, EMT services. So, and integrating with if you have an emergency notification system, we can initiate that as well. So it does interface with all those systems. So that's a good way to categorize.
I like that term, traffic cop, because I do think that, ultimately somebody has to be the traffic cop within your security ecosystem. If you've got a key piece of that technology that you're relying on more than others, it tends to do it. Whether it's Omnalert, whether it's your extremely integrated VMS, whether it's some other sort of emergency management platform, ultimately one of your pieces becomes that traffic cop. It sort of becomes the information guide that sort of runs the show. And If you are working in a closed platform environment, you don't get to decide who that is. You don't get to decide which system ultimately is the one in charge. With an open ecosystem, you turn that relationship around. You preserve the investments that already work, the ones you're prioritizing. You're choosing the right technology for each part of your response. As your needs change and evolve, you add, you expand, you replace without building everything around them up from scratch again. The workflow becomes consistent. The individual technologies are the things that change. Your cameras don't have to come from the same company as your access control system. Your notification platform doesn't have to be the same platform that your SOC uses. Your collaboration tools, they're probably already deeply embedded across the organization, and that's okay. In an open ecosystem, they don't have to all be one system. They just have to work together. They have to get along. That's the value of an open ecosystem. You're not designing your response around the limitations of a particular platform. You're connecting all the technologies you need around the response that you want to execute. The technology adapts to the response plan, not the other way around. And ultimately, at least in my mind, that's why open ecosystems win. And this is really why, the Omnalert way of thinking about security. Our platform was designed around the detect, verify, act philosophy. Our AI detects the threat as early as possible with an extremely high degree of accuracy. We verify what's happening by putting that information in front of a human who can understand the event, apply context, and make a decision. And then we act. We use that decision to initiate the response across the systems and the people that are already a part of your environment. Detection matters, but detection by itself isn't the outcome. The outcome is what you're able to do with it and immediately after it. That's why the open ecosystem we just talked about is so important to Omnalert. We don't expect every piece of that response to belong to us. Your cameras, your VMS, your access control, your notification systems, your collaboration tools, they might and probably do all come from different places. Our job is to make sure that we can help them to connect around the same workflow. Get the right information in front of the right person, support a fast decision, activate the right systems, detect, verify, act, and make sure the technology all works around your response plan.
Yeah, Eric, as you know, obviously, if we're talking about on the detection side, if we're talking about weapons detection, firearm detection, I mean, most incidents are over within 5 minutes. And so if you're able to get a head start, if you will, on your response by that, detecting that threat, like I mentioned, in the exterior of a building, on the perimeter of a building, that gives you invaluable time to be able to respond to both inside the facility, summoning first responders without having to call 911 manually, being able to get those resources deployed the second that a threat is detected and verified by a human. That is absolutely critical. And having that end-to-end system.
And when we start looking at those timelines, you're talking about being over within 5 minutes. Sometimes that doesn't include many minutes of ramp up time before shots are fired. That is an opportunity, whether you're using a gun detection algorithm or a walkthrough system, or even just plain old security cameras. That's an opportunity to detect early as well. I'm going to use this test footage here as an example of what I mean. A person carrying a firearm walks into the view of one of our cameras. Omnalert Gun Detect identifies the weapon. We create a detection event. That's the beginning of our workflow in the real world. The event immediately goes to whatever verification model the organization's chosen. That could be Omnalert monitoring, an internal security operations center. In this instance, it's going to my security team using the Omnalert app. You can see them in the background. That threat's verified. Once the threat is confirmed and understood, we start executing the response plan. Maybe we lock doors. Maybe we trigger an alarm. We launch emergency notifications. We dispatch security. Importantly, these actions don't necessarily happen one after another after another. They start to happen simultaneously. That's the power of an integrated solution and an open ecosystem. Instead of somebody seeing a threat sequentially, making a phone call, then finding the right person, then logging into another system, we've taken that entire chain of events and turned it into a predefined workflow. That's what we mean when we talk about moving beyond detection. The detection gives us the information. The workflow turns that information into action. And that's where we're going to wrap it up. My takeaways from this, the conversations that I have every day, really are: don't wait for an incident to figure out how your system's supposed to work together. Look at your workflow now, understand how you detect the threat, understand how your verification works. Know who makes that decision, know which systems need to act. Make sure the people responding have the same information as the people identifying or verifying. Find the friction before an emergency finds it for you. The goal is a faster, coordinated response. And so with that, Ari, you got any last tips or last things you want to hit before we go to Q&A?
Yeah, I mean, and you mentioned it, Eric. I mean, don't wait. I mean, the whole thing here, looking at, I was presenting to the superintendent's conference back in January and looking at some actual data, and obviously we have OmniAlert data, but it was over 3,000 actual detections last year in 2025, and in different scenarios and whatnot. And it's just, you'll be surprised that the number of firearms are where they should not be. We do have some questions here. If you have questions, hit the Q&A button. One question that came in, and this ties into what you just mentioned, Eric. So who should verify a detection at the organization? Is it a security team, or what? Who should do that, the verification
So
stuff?
there are a lot of different philosophies to this. My answer is whoever is best equipped to do it. I work with primarily companies that are putting OmniAlert Gun Detect out there, and verification is handled in a number of different places. Now, about 90% of our customers at OmniAlert use OmniAlert verification. That's our verification facilities. They're geographically distributed, they're redundant, they're over in a large number of places, and they're task trained specifically to work with the OmniAlert Gun Detect environment. 90% of our customers use them because their existing staff members already have things to do. They want to receive verified events that require action, that they can make their decision not on, is this something that needs a response, but what is the response that we want to take? Now, a number of our customers put them directly into their security operations center, whether that's into an IMIC system or on a video wall, or even to put down on the VMS. And those are organizations that already have a staff that might be on site that is already fielding and vetting things, and they need that local context. They need to be able to say, is this a firearm? Yes or no, but also, is this a firearm that I need to take action on here in my environment? They need a little bit more information. They need a little bit of that local context. They're the best choice for the job. Some organizations that we work with, they have multiple verification methods. They'll go to OmniAlert monitoring. They'll go out to the SRO, the school principal, the regional manager, the GSOC, via one of another number of methods. Put it in the VMS, put it in their pocket via a cell phone, so that they're getting the same exact information, and they're getting OmniAlert verification alongside that. They can get the detection at the same time, and then have a second set of eyes say yes or no, this does or doesn't need attention. I think that in each of those cases, I can't say they're wrong. It's really about making sure that it fits my organization. It does it the way that my workflow needs to have it. If we were to simply say everything has to go through our monitoring station, no ifs, ands, or buts, that's not going to work for some folks. That's not going to work for your enterprise customers out there. That's not going to work for your highly secure environments. That's not going to work for every workflow. And we want to make sure, even though this Detect, Verify, Act workflow is a standard, it's an extremely open standard that hits on the important beats, and it allows customization. I hope that answered the question.
It does, and I just want to add, make sure that the people that are receiving the verification, the verified detections, you have a policy written around that on what to do when you do receive, because you have some organizations that might have 15 people get the verified detections, and which probably too many. But I think one of the leading practices is to have trained security folks that may have a little bit more context to do that. But make sure that you have policies.
And on that same, before you go on the next one, you talk about 15 people may be too big, might not. If we talk about that collaboration step, making sure everyone's operating from the same picture, we've got the same information in everyone's hands at the same time. That includes actions that have been taken. So if I've got 15 people on that verification chain and one of them says escalate, well, that escalation is happening, but we've also got to inform all of the other 14 people instantly, a real time picture of what's going on. Make sure your environment's capable of doing that. We do that via the OmniAlert app. There's other systems out there that do it via other methods, but that way we're not duplicating efforts, we're not second guessing ourselves, and we're not having someone come to the party late and try and kick off the response again. On that same note, if there is an escalation, make sure you got an ability to claw it back. Maybe late information changes the operational picture, and we need to be able to de-escalate just as fast as we escalated.
Mm, great point, Eric. I have a question here from Robin. Hey, Robin, glad you could join us. If you already use OmniAlert for notifications, what is the easiest way to start integrating this detection system? Site assessment first. What is so? And I'm glad you asked that, Robin, because there are thousands of organizations that are using OmniAlert for notification and workflow automation, but don't yet have that early threat detection piece. And I'm not going to say it's like it is easy. I mean, you've had IPVM characterized as almost a plug and play type system. But Eric, what would you recommend for Robin and other current OmniAlert customers that have the workflow automation emergency notification platform? What is the best way to integrate with Gun Detect?
I would say the first step is a conversation. A site assessment's always going to be a part of that conversation, but to be honest, the first step is really an assessment of needs. We've heard it so many different times. People say that not every organization is the same. My response is different based on every different location. And we do service, I used to say from 5 cameras to 5,000. Now it's closer from 8 cameras to 8 or 10,000, depending on the customer. So looking at what you have, looking at your needs, I think is the first step. It's really about, what does my operational picture look like? What does my site look like? What does my existing camera footprint look like? And we'll talk about your tech stack and how we can get, not just detection on the cameras, but that what happens after detection piece as well. What else can we tie into? What can we trigger? How can our end-to-end workflow work with your needs? How can your end-to-end workflow work with ours? I think that we've covered this in other webinars before about how we can plan out a system from end to end. Our last webinar about beyond detection beyond the perimeter, I think was important because it talked about classifying individual cameras, which cameras are appropriate to run the OmniAlert platform. The webinar we did, I think 8 months ago at this point, talked about kind of the basics of implementing. And it's really going to be not dependent on your tech stack, but it's going to lean hard into that tech stack and how we can utilize it and how some things might need to be moved around a little bit or specifically tuned to work with a video analytic. So the first step, I think, would be a conversation. A site assessment would follow, whether that's a virtual assessment or an on-site assessment. But I think that we need to kind of slow that down a little bit before we get to it to make sure we all have, I use this term a lot, a good operational picture before we start moving forward. We want to verify before we act.
Yep, exactly. I also recommend too, if there is a vulnerability or certain areas of the campus, for example, Robin is in higher education, is to run a pilot, if you will, like just. You could just start with one appliance, OmniAlert Gun Detect appliance, throw it on your network, connect it to your existing OmniAlert system, and run that for a month or so, and do some various testing. Look at those areas on the campus, open spaces, parking lots. Parking lots are a big thing. We're going to be talking about that a little bit more in the upcoming months, Eric. Securing parking lots and outdoor spaces. And we talked about it before. So,
yeah, I would
question.
say. I would say, you talk about pilots, you say a month or two. If someone has serious concerns and they're looking into a solution like this, we'll come down for a shorter pilot than that. Even get someone on site quickly with an appliance, plug it in, put your cameras to their paces so you can understand what the product does. That's something that we do every day. We call it a brandish weapon exercise. You can speak with your OmniAlert rep about that specifically if you want to, Robin.
Mm-hmm. A couple more questions, then we'll wrap it up. We're getting short on time here. So who creates the workflows?
I
that you're
would say
talking
that's
about?
a collaborative effort. I mean, you know it as well as I do. The steps are very similar. It is all about that. Technology detects. We have a human being verify. We have a lot of different action opportunities. But how and when that action occurs can change, and that's customizable per location for OmniAlert. If we're talking about the workflow philosophy, I would say that you activate your technologies where you need to activate them. In an OmniAlert situation, we detect a weapon, or your walkthrough device detects a weapon, or your panic button hits. Maybe you want to trigger an integration right off the bat before we verify, just in case, and then have verification ramp it down. Lock the doors when the walkthrough system goes off, just for a second until we verify that that's not indeed a weapon. Do the same sort of thing. Panic button comes in, notify a group of people immediately, give you a chance to ramp it down afterwards. Maybe we want to trigger some activations at the verification step. Maybe we want to trigger some integrations at the escalated step or the confirmation step. There's a number of different places that you can trigger different technologies in most of these workflows. And what it's really about is finding out what works best for the environment.
Perfect. This is another similar question. We have OmniAlert for notifications. How do we add weapon detection at our campus? But Eric, from this perspective, I mean, what exactly is it? Is it, I mentioned like the fact that it's an appliance. I mean, how many units do you buy? Is it like a rack system? What exactly would a school, or in this case, a campus, need to do as far as
Sure,
like the actual implementation?
implementation is going to depend on the needs of the campus itself. If we're talking about a small number of cameras, maybe a couple dozen, might be able to get away with a single OmniAlert appliance. That's going to be a small form factor unit, smaller than a PC tower that can rest in your server room or in a wiring closet and connect directly to those local cameras. If we're talking about a location that has hundreds or thousands of cameras, we could service them with multiple appliances. A college campus that has 15 buildings, each building has 20 or 30 cameras, we could drop an appliance in each building. Or if they're all connected by fiber, we could move to rack mount appliances. And that's going to be a larger rack mount unit that has multiple graphics processing units, that does lots and lots of processing of feeds. The AI runs directly on that device, and it brings in all those camera feeds and processes them there. So that individual rack mount unit can handle hundreds of cameras rather than the couple dozen that small form factor appliance can use. It really comes down to what's applicable for your environment and your budget, because there are obviously cost concerns. 9 times out of 10, we're going to default to whatever is the least expensive option for our client, because that's what they want. Unless there's teams out there that say, I must have a rack mount unit, I must have something that can handle it at one location. In that case, we'll default to whatever the client decides.
And how many cameras can the technology that OmniAlert support at any given time? Is there
I
a
mean, if you're
maximum?
talking about the individual servers, that's going to be different than OmniAlert itself. I mean, we've got customers out there that are running. We've got a school district in the Baltimore area running over 8,000 cameras over their entire footprint. We've got large hospital systems that have individual locations with more than 2,000 cameras. But we've also got small implementations, retail outlets, housing complexes that have maybe a dozen or so at individual locations. So really, it's all about the priorities of what you need. Our last webinar talked about planning deployment around approaches, around entrances, exits, soft targets, transitory areas, stairwells, busy hallways. So maybe it's not every camera in the organization. Maybe it's those important cameras where threats move. But also, we've got other folks out there that say, I want it on every camera, because what if it affected one of those cameras that we typically don't cover? What if it was in an area that's uncovered? That's a worst case scenario. I see a question that just popped in. Do you have installation directly from cloud without a local box? We do not support OmniAlert for our cloud. Our detection does not support cloud detection at this point, because we're doing real-time detection on high bandwidth, high res camera screens. 1080p, 4K, 6K, higher. That's a lot of bandwidth. That's a lot of bandwidth to send to the cloud and back. And most clients out there find that cost prohibitive and not security conscious. So we do our processing locally. Your streams never leave your location. They always stay on-prem, on-site, being processed at that local box. That local appliance, whether it's a rack mount unit or a small form factor appliance, it's going to operate the same way. When a detection event occurs locally, then we engage the cloud for distribution, verification, notification, and action.
Exactly, and that has been a priority for most organizations is the privacy aspect of keeping it local to their network. Very important.
Especially when we get into hospitals, when we get into education, and things like that.
Yep, exactly. Now, there's nothing to say that having a, cloud management capability is one thing, but the actual detections being on the secure network, on the local network is absolutely critical. And it's only actually moving more in that direction in a lot of ways.
And we do have cloud management. We just don't have cloud detection. We can manage those appliances from the cloud. We can add cameras from the cloud. We can manage how those appliances function from the cloud, but actually processing, we want to make sure that stays on site, because that's where the action happens.
Eric, there are a couple more questions in the Q&A. Do you have access to that?
I do.
So we
I
have.
do.
Oh, you want to take your pick at one of those because we are almost out of time here.
Sure. I mean, you're gonna have to fill in on both of these. First one I'll take is any issues connected with MView. I'm not familiar with MView itself. I'm not going to say yes or no there. I will say that when it comes to integrating, we have a lot of different open integration methods that we use. We have 50 integrations at this point that are not open integrations that we work with. So if you have a platform that accepts a webhook, that accepts an XML stream, that accepts something like that, we may integrate with it. It's for live viewing of local cameras from first responders during a response. We don't have a dedicated integration. However, we do facilitate systems like that through our alerting. We can discuss that when we speak with you about it. Supporting a system like that, fairly easy. It's just moving data from one place to another. If we require a dedicated integration, we've got a team that does that. We're talking with new partners every day about bringing them on board and enabling our tech to work with theirs. Again, that's the benefit of an open system. We're willing to, and we want to work with other platforms. That last question, are we able to integrate with digital wayfinding systems? I'm going to let you take this one because you've actually been speaking with some partners that do that recently. Although we're not ready to announce anything yet, we do have things in the hopper, I believe.
Yeah, we certainly do, and we certainly can. It really depends on the system. So we talked about interoperability. There's some standard protocols that we work with other technologies. So I would say highly likely, depending on what wayfinding system it is. But reach out to your account manager at OmniAlert to find out for certain if that specific one. But we integrate with digital signage and plenty of other signage opportunities.
If you don't have an account manager at OmniAlert, the QR code on the screen, it's been up there for a little bit, brings us directly to your Contact Us form. That Contact Us form goes directly to our team. They'll distribute it out to an expert that'll get back to you.
Mm-hmm. But that's a great question, Brandy, and I'm pretty certain that we can, depending on what it is, and if it's an open-based system, then we can. Because we've been for decades, but connecting to digital signage way back in the day. So. All good. Well, Eric, we are completely out of time. Is there any final thoughts that you want to share as folks depart for the rest of their afternoon?
I mean, we look at this through the lens of gun detection, but a simple end-to-end process like this is repeatable, whether you're using AI or not. You've got systems that are there to detect emergencies of all sorts. You've got mechanisms to get that information into people's hands for verification, not AI verification, but simply understanding and creating that action, that response, and make sure it's an orchestrated response so that the information that you're getting from the front end makes it all the way back to the responders in a timely and organized manner so that everyone's working from that same operational platform. It is as simple, maybe not as easy as 3 steps: detect, verify, act.
Right. It is. It's a very, I mean, the simple is the essence of anything with emergency response. Once you start complicating things, once you take that 5-page emergency response plan and turn to 500 pages, you might as well get rid of the darn thing. So, well, thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. Thank you all for joining us today. Stay tuned. We're going to have some additional webinars coming up to explore different topics. Do you have any topics that you would like to cover? Who should they reach out to? The contact us form, right? If there's a topic that you'd like us to cover, if you're a current customer, you're just exploring OmniAlert with gun detection and the notification and the workflow automation. Let us know if there's topics that you want to learn about, and if you'd like to see a live demonstration, we could certainly. We're deployed in a number of Access Experience Centers and other partners around the nation. So if you'd like to see this firsthand, let us know. But just that contact us form and the good old QR code. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.